Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining me and my very special guest. He is one of the most diverse, innovative, and theatrically imaginative directors, writers, and producers. He has given us such shows as Here Lies Love, Bloody Bloody Andrew Jackson, Beetlejuice, American Utopia, Peter and the Starcatcher, Rocky, Oh Hello on Broadway, the Pee Wee Herman Show, and of course, Moulin Rouge, the musical, which is up for 14 Tony Awards, including one for my guest, Best Director in a Musical. It is so great to be catching up with. Please welcome Alex Timbers.
It's very exciting to be here. It's so good to see you. Thank you for having me.
I have missed you, my friend, just so you know that.
You're the best part of any opening night or party is getting to see you. You're always so you're such a champion of the theater and such an advocate, and it's a pleasure to be in your company at any point.
Well, that means the world to me. And like I said, this is what I've been doing during the pandemic. I've just been trying to keep all the fans out there. I've been catching up with all the stars in your shows and everybody else who works on Broadway. First off, how are you, my friend, and where are you?
Oh, thanks. I live in Times Square, and I've been here for the whole time. You do too? Okay. We're neighbors. Yeah. I've gone through all the emotions just like everyone else, but any opportunity to talk about theater and be thinking forward to theater is great. So I'm very happy right now.
Because, we're coming up on our first year anniversary since the shutdown began. I mean, March 12th is right around the corner. I mean, isn't that mind blowing that it's been a year?
Yeah, it's extraordinary. And, I feel like I have such clarity, I'm sure like you do, of like what that week was like, that first week. And then the next 2 months, I probably couldn't tell you like 2 books I read. So it's extraordinary.
Because what were those first few months like for you? Because you and I haven't caught up during this, because everyone I've spoken to was like the beginning was really rough. And of course, your show, Moulin Rouge, was hit by the pandemic very badly early on. So how did you deal with all of that?
Well, I remember the week that everything was happening because I was actually with that Broadway shut down. I was in Los Angeles doing a musical workshop, believe it or not. And I got a text from Karen Olivo with that, the Michael Paulson article about the usher getting sick. And that's when I was like, okay, I need to get back now, be with the companies. And as I was flying from LAX, we got the alert happened that Broadway was getting shut down. And I think at first it was really just, like so many people just trying to assess, are the people that you work with and is everyone okay? I think Moulin Rouge was hit really intensely by the coronavirus. And I think whereas Beetlejuice had a different experience, so yeah.
Because, now that there's a light at the end of a tunnel.
Yeah.
I mean, have the days got a little brighter for you? Meaning, do you have good days and bad days still? Or, are there better days? What's it like now for you?
Yeah, well, any day focused on theater is a great day. We've been with Moulin Rouge, we've been doing Australia auditions. And with Beetlejuice, we've been doing Korea auditions. So that's been over the last month, that's been a real sort of highlight to focus on. We for Here Lies Love, back in the day, we were supposed to do an Australia production. So we got to see how amazing that acting pool is. And so now to get to actually spend several weeks just sort of living in that and getting to meet these extraordinary people. That's been thrilling because it definitely, as you said, the light feels closer and closer. So
have you been doing these auditions like on StreamYard or Zoom? I mean,
it's a great question. So for Moulin Rouge, the producers set up a video link at 1501 Broadway. And so in a way, it's really interesting because of the way the sizings of the shots and the size of the TV and stuff. It actually, people are human scale in the room with you. So it actually sort of, to the extent you can, mimics that process a lot. And so that was extraordinary. We were able to speak to the actors. If there were notes, you could see a full length shot. You could be closer with the actors. So you have that sense of intimacy to really have access to what they're doing. And then also you're able to see the creative team, the associates who were there, and the music team. So you were able to actually feel like you were as much in the room as possible, and there was no delay. It was really extraordinary. I think everyone came away from that process being like, I did not expect this to go as smoothly and feel like as creatively, like there was as much transacting between performer and creative team as we expect, as there were.
Yeah. Well, we have to give a big shout out to your producers of Moulin Rouge, because
Amazing.
no one does it better than that team. Just so you know, look what they've come up with, like, to find a great way to cast and keep it all so creative and in the moment.
Yeah, they're fantastic. I mean, they always put the art first, and it's been extraordinary to get to go on this journey with them.
Well, I have to congratulate you on the 14 Tony nominations that Moulin Rouge has received, including yours for Best Director of a Musical. Alex, what does this nomination mean to you?
It means a lot to me, just particularly in this circumstances. It's just wonderful to be thinking about theater and celebrating theater. I've actually, I'm a director of musicals. That's like what I sort of see myself as. I've never been nominated in this category. So I feel very like that's also really was really a thrilling part of it. And then to have so many, of the other folks on the, like, Robin Herder and Saw and like all these, performers that are so extraordinary to be recognized like that. In addition to, Karen and Aaron and Danny and the designers and Sonia and John, it's awesome. It's awesome. It's an awesome feeling. So thank you.
No, it's pretty amazing. When I read the list, I was like, wow, this is like the best buffet for Moulin Rouge. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, yeah, it's a group that can't wait to be back in the theater with them. They're all amazing, amazing, talented people.
All right, well, we have to talk about this because, many theater goers don't realize how long it takes for a Broadway musical to get to Broadway. How many years were you working on Moulin Rouge?
Well, it's been 8 years now. So it was 2013 that I got reached out to by Baz. And 8 years. It's more extraordinary, right?
Because, sometimes movies take a year to make, but people don't always realize. They're like, oh, here's an ad for Moulin Rouge, the musical. Let's go see this. And no one realized how many years of, workshops and just discussions go into all of this to make this magic happen 8 times a week.
Yeah, it's amazing. The thing I love about the theater, and particularly love about musicals, is how collaborative it is. It's truly, there's like, you're in there with the actors, the music directors, the producers, the choreographer, the design, all figuring this out together. And that's why I love the process of tech, because you go on this journey with the designers, you go on this journey with the actors, and now we're all in a room together collaborating. But that process of collaboration, the iterative process of musical theater, of getting to do readings and workshops and sort of getting to see it over and over again, so that what the audience experiences on stage isn't the first draft, it's the 15th draft. I think that's really thrilling. But yeah, it does take a long time.
Okay, the beloved film, of course, was the vision of the brilliant Baz Luhrmann.
Oh, yeah, amazing.
And he felt that he wasn't right to bring it to the stage. So how did you get involved to direct the musical? And do you remember that initial meeting you had with Baz?
Oh, yeah. How could I ever forget it? Absolutely. I've had this theater company that does work about historical figures and high art and low art and period and now. And so, Baz's work is kind of like the holy grail in a way, it's something that my work, I've always looked up to. I was at a dinner party and we were talking about Ken Russell movies and all these things. I was asking about all these things that I love. That I was like, do you love these things too? And he's so nice. And he was like, yes, I love those things too. And then the next day I got an email from him. He's like, can we talk about Moulin Rouge? And I guess he had seen Blah, Blah, Andrew Jackson, and he had seen Here Lies Love. And so you get an email like that from one of your heroes about a movie that you adore and, so transformative for musical theater, and such a celebration of the American musical that I was thrilled. And then when we got together, we were very of the same mind of what any stage adaptation would need to do. So from that initial conversation, I feel like, this person that you would dream of being a kind of kindred spirit with, you sort of in a way kind of are, at least in Israel. You're that was so thrilling. So,
because you two have the same kind of synergy. I'm sure when you met, it was just wow, you just synergy. I mean, you perfect blending of the two of you together.
Oh, thanks. Well, I can only aspire to be as like have it's he is such an electric, brilliant mind of drawing all these connections. But immediately we were both like, how do you achieve that sense of immersiveness and viscerality that he did on screen? How do you do that on the stage where you don't have like editing, you don't have, crane moves and this and the other, and the ability to like, alter frame rates and things like that. And so that was an amazing challenge. The other thing was thinking about the music and how you take advantage of the last 20 years of music. And then also, he wasn't precious about story. I mean, before Baz was a great film director, he was a great theater director. And so he understood, he was like, when we were talking about like, look, Satine and Christian need to have in a theater piece, your protagonists need to be always making positive active choices, whether they're succeeding or whether they're failing, like Charlie Brown. Charlie Brown needs to kind of get back up and try to always kick that football. And so in terms of altering the characters and some of the dynamics and all that stuff, he was like completely cool and on board with and excited about and energized by. So all of that was wonderful. He's a perfect collaborator.
Because I want to talk about the biggest challenges of the musical is pure perfection. You know that. I have seen this show numerous times and I love Moulin Rouge. But there's also, I'm sure there were big challenges for you with, and your stellar team of bringing Moulin Rouge to the stage. Because you wanted to create like a theatrical vocabulary to the proceedings, didn't you?
Yes, absolutely. And so that was those questions that, what the movie vibrated with. How do you do that? How do you transport an audience to 1899 Montmartre, but you're on 45th Street? And so, the first thoughts were really about how do you make it immersive? Well, do you have ramps and runways going through the eyes? Do you have a passerelle? Do you have the design be 360? Do you want the people in the mezzanine to feel just as immediate an experience and as embraced as the people in those cocktail seating in the passerelle? And so that was the first thought. How do you make it as democratic as possible, and how do you make it feel as immediate as possible?
Was that sort of what unlocked it for all of you? Was that 360 immersive kind of thing?
Yeah, well, that was definitely felt like the idea of like, I as a fan, like, what do you want to experience? Well, when I walk in that theater, I want to feel like I'm at the club. I'm at the Moulin Rouge. I don't want to feel like I'm back at England before Christian's about to come to Paris or whatever. I want to feel like I'm there. And that's the kind of the Hal Prince theatrical envelope of the show that the rest of the show takes place in. So that felt easy and exciting and kind of obvious, and then everything else that sort of, you start to think about those juxtapositions. How do you take the deluxe maximalism and the deluxe color of the club and contrast that with the poverty of the streets of Montmartre, what's happening outside the club? And so then you start to figure out kind of a color palette and a vocabulary, and you start to figure out, okay, here, what the Bohemians in the film are both like, they're like panto characters, but they're also deeply emotional artists. And so how do you kind of marry those styles and tones? And so, well, it's always better to go more emotionally authentic. And so we pushed in that direction. And, we did what, Peter and Sarkatcher, there are like 6 lost boys in the book, or 7. And so we were like, 4, so we had the same thing here. Like, instead of 8 Bohemians, there are 2 Bohemians plus Christian. So there were a lot of choices like that early on that were just like, I think helpful concisions in terms of like tone and scope. And John Logan was just so masterful immediately at like being like, this is what's important. This we don't have to pursue as doggedly.
All right, let's talk about the collaboration of John Logan. I've been obsessed with John Logan since I saw his off-Broadway plays here, and he knows that before he hit it big. I mean, what was it like collaborating with him? Because you're the perfect collaborator. I mean, not every director is. You are the perfect collaborator, and that's what I think theater is all about, or any project is all about, is collaborating. What made your collaboration so special with John Logan, and what did you both want to achieve with the character narrative throughout the musical?
Yeah. Well, I like you, I'm a big John Logan fan. I mean, I love his plays. I love his theater work. I love Red, but I also love, Skyfall and Gladiator and all the, he really is great at finding emotional authenticity in genre, in period, and elevating genre. And so, and there's a musicality and a kind of kind of impish wit to what he does. And that's like exactly what this thing needed to be. And he saw it as, he didn't see it as a jukebox musical. He saw it as, we're building this robust play that happens to have songs within it. And so I thought that was a great way to kind of like approach the book. He really wanted to get into the truth of what it was to be a courtesan in 1900. We both really wanted the Duke to recalibrate that love triangle so it was as plausible, and the challenge was and the question of it was as formidable as possible for Satine. So he had really great instincts just from the start, and he's just, I don't know how well you've gotten to know him yet, but I hope you do, because he's also just a blast. So, and knows every, talk about Ken Russell. He sent me like this like graphic novel version of Ken Russell's The Devils, that like Vanessa Redgrave, Oliver Reed movie. I mean, like he's got like just a whole theatrical history. He's a cinephile. He's got all that stuff at his fingertips. And yeah, it's really fun to work with him.
Because I just loved how you all fleshed out every character. Mm-hmm. Your ensemble is perfect.
Oh my God.
Moulin Rouge, because there's a story behind each and every person. Yeah. And every time I've gone back to Moulin Rouge, I also, in the beginning, I try to follow someone else and their stories like, oh, that's who he is. That's who she is, and that's what I love about all the characters throughout Moulin Rouge. You've given them all a story.
I love that you say that. Thank you. When we cast everyone top to bottom, the whole cast list, we were like, we only wanted to cast people that we were like, we want to go on the event. What's the Netflix spinoff following Paloma Garcia Lee's character, And we did a lot of work together as a company of like looking at, okay, Reed LaPlow, what's the backstory of his character? Who is he in love with? Who did he used to date? What is like his side gig? Like, what's that? Because I think, and it's all organic to the thing, Satine's the headliner, but Nini also, it's like a vaudeville, right? So it's like, act number 2, that's La Chocolate's the star of that, Paloma Garcia Lee, Corey, they're all like, they're the star of their own section. So you want that whole, that intrigue and that star wattage. And I think everyone in the cast has that. So thank you for pointing that out.
So I said, it was so beautifully cast. I mean, I love your cast. I mean, Was it a big challenge to find everybody you want? Was it an easier show to cast, or is it ever easy to cast a show? Or, how did your cast come about for this original production of Moulin Rouge?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I've never worked really, Here Lies Love sort of, but I've never really worked on a dance musical before. So the kind of like triple threat and what people don't really always talk about too is coverage, internal coverage. So you've got these people who are just like nailing it, dancing, singing, and also they're also at the matinee playing this character and the other and covering these other 3 things. So so the process of seeing, New York has such extraordinary actors, but the process of getting to cast a show was long and really specific, but inspiring, like at every turn. It's just every day, I don't eat before a casting session because I'm always so nervous. I'm so anxious. Like you just want everyone to succeed and have a great time in the rehearsal room and feel like they're offering up the stuff that they're the most excited to offer up. It was not a quick process, but it was absolutely a fun process.
Oh, yeah. I would think the boldest change from the film to the show you mentioned was the music. Now, did you, John Logan, and your brilliant music director, Justin Levine, did you all lock yourselves in a Times Square hotel room with like a keyboard and go through music?
Yes. Well, let me say, Justin Levine is like a genius. We've worked together since I think 2008. He must have been like 22 out of NYU right at the time. And he was the music director on Blah Blah Andrew Jackson. He's an estimable composer of his own right. His musical The Outsiders is happening at the Goodman sometime really soon. He's extraordinary. But yeah, literally my girlfriend's keyboard, I had it under my arm. We went to the AKA, which crossed from the Hudson, and locked ourselves in a hotel room over a couple weeks. Justin would just jam on the keyboard. He'd bring in song ideas. We'd all bring in song ideas. We would break the story as if it was, that's getting back to what John said, an original play. we would break the story as if it wasn't like its own thing that existed, and try in different song ideas, and Justin would try different mashups and different spins on different things. And then that was the beginning of the process, because Justin as a musical storyteller, but then the arrangements, the vocal arrangements. I mean, you listen to Chandelier. I mean, it's like thrilling what he's done. And he has a bunch of collaborators, Matt Stein, who is an old pal of his. He worked on Here Lies Love. He built that whole like crazy pre-show of Here Lies Love, where it's like the kind of the greatest like overture ever of like 80 themes all melded into one. And this amazing woman, Katie Kresick, who I got to work with originally on Mozart in the Jungle, a guy named Charlie Rosen, who was 17 when he was the bassist at Blay Blay Andrew Jackson in LA. So that like, you know, but now he's like, you know, like a TV music director and a band leader and an orchestrator and conductor and all that stuff. But the four of them really built this amazing tapestry, and that on top of the music production and the vocal arrangers, it's really mind blowing. And those actors who were like killing it in Roxanne and singing, it's like I'm very lucky to have. My job is like the easiest in the building for sure.
No, you make it look easy, but it's probably the hardest, because you put all the pieces together, you bake the cake. You know, it's interesting. We all knew these songs, but like I said, it's as if the score to Moulin Rouge, the musical, was written for your show, because all the songs you've given to everybody continue to tell their story. And that doesn't always happen. You just didn't say, oh, well, you know what? She can belt this number. Let's give her that. No, it's all about character development with these songs. And that's a really big deal.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, when we did a workshop, and I remember Baz came away, like there was that section it's like the low point in Act 2 where Christian Satina singing "Rolling in the Deep," and I think Baz was like, that's it. That's like what the whole thing needs to be like. So it's great. And so it's been a lot of that. It's like finding those things where you're hearing the songs, you know, you have that emotional charge to, it's your first kiss, it's your first this, it's like, but then it's also unlocking the lyrics, and you're understanding what Roxanne meant that whole time and what Chandelier was really about. So, you know, that's a thrilling element to the show. Thank you.
Well, I, like many others, fell in love with the show in Boston at the...
Oh, you came there? Oh, great. I'm so happy to hear that.
Oh, and I went to the room, and the Rodgers and Hammerstein desk, and all. Did
you see the Fosse table?
I saw the Fosse table with the chips on it, because I saw Aaron afterwards and Robin Herder. I love that theater. I'm obsessed, because I had never been to the Colonial.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I mean, it must have been. So what did you learn from the out of town in Boston when you were back in New York perfecting the show for Broadway? Like, what changes? Were there drastic changes that you made, or were they all subtle?
You know, we made a lot of changes. I think one of the things we realized was that in the middle of the second act, we had this kind of section where Christian and Satine weren't really progressing as characters, and we weren't servicing them well as our leads. And so we had this kind of, what we called a kind of like second act, kind of a knuckle in the middle that we needed to kind of figure out. And that involved this wonderful song from Florence and the Machine called Shake It Out. That was like it was like a kind of like Gypsies, Vagabonds. I don't, you know, that Cher song. Gypsy Tramps and Thieves. It was a kind of one of those, and it was so inspiring. And that plus Chandelier, plus it felt like there were a couple of repeated beats, and so we needed to kind of figure out what that was in the middle. And that was, I think, the most like dramatic structural change. And then lots of work along the way throughout. But I definitely feel like Act 2 got the most focus. But P.S. like 90% of out of towns are right. You're like focused on Act 2. So yeah, it was transformative. And that theater, the Colonial, to be able to reopen it, I mean, you can attest this. It's like the most gorgeous theater in North America, right? It's extraordinary. So
I was hyperventilating, because I mean, just the posters. I mean, they took a big tour of the. I felt like a 12-year-old kid, literally going to the theater for the very first time. It was just absolutely mind blowing just to see the theater, and then to walk into the doors and look what this world you created, Moulin Rouge. We all felt we were in Paris. We all felt we were there.
Oh, yeah, Derek McLean and Justin Townsend and Kathy Zuber, they're extraordinary. For me, the moment I was hyperventilating, I think was on our opening night. Tommy Tune came in, and I was like, holy shit, this is real. Like this is, like I just revere him so much. So yeah, there were a lot of those kind of moments of like, whoa, what is happening? I do remember the first time when the audiences came into the theater on the first preview, and people came in, and the first thing they did was pulled out their cell phone, and they were like, there's a photo we actually have a profile of like just all these people like gawking and taking photos of like what Derek did, and I was like, that's well, they definitely feel transported. So yeah.
I mean, like I said, the team you put together. I mean, Derek and Kathleen Zuber and Justin Urlacher and Peter Hylensky, the sound.
Yeah, Hylensky's amazing.
Totally the best. Well, I want to go back to the beginning. Yeah. Growing up, where did your love for theater and the arts begin? And what were your earliest creative outlets?
Oh, it's so funny you asked that. So I grew up in New York City. I grew up in Manhattan. And so I, like seeing theater has always been a part of my life. I went to an all boys school. So we did a school play every year, and I would play the Angel Gabriel, or like we weirdly did Moliere in 5th grade, and I played Madame Jardin and Le Bourgeois Gentilhomme. I can't explain it. An all-male Oliver. It was, confusing.
Who did you play in Oliver?
I played I think he was like a doctor who's like a quack or something like that. He wasn't a good guy, I think. And then got into with some friends making a public access TV show. And we were like 12. And you remember Manhattan Neighborhood Network? It might still exist. Yeah, were you doing that too?
Broadway Beat was on that. I remember your show. Hello, the Shabu Review.
The Shabu Review, yeah. Channel 59, like
35 or 34, which is next to the Robin Bird channel. And people kept saying, Richard, what channel is Broadway Beat on? We see this woman with this crocheted, brassiere on. I'm like, no, move the channel before. But remember MNN?
Yeah, yes, absolutely. MNN was like a big part of growing up here. At the Oh Hello opening, Robin Bird came, and I remember I'd be like, I wouldn't, thing to say that I was truly like a MNN fixture in the way that she was, but yeah, we were making videos, and that was a huge creative outlet for us. And I ended up going to Illinois for high school and continuing to work on a public access TV show there, and I loved that. It was a wonderful focus, and then there were shows that I adored. The thing that was probably the most transformative though for me was seeing Tommy at the St. James. And I think what I loved about it was I didn't know anything going in, and my mother just bought me a ticket. She bought me like a ticket to like all these, Love, Valor, Compassion, all these things. And I was like, I don't know what this is. And she's like, just go. And I come back and be like, oh my God, my mind is blown. This is awesome. And same thing with Tommy. And for me as a musical theater, seeing something, while it wasn't a contemporary score in the strictest sense, something that was having a dialogue with the popular culture, where the visuals were having these music video visuals. And I was so taken by that. And when the opportunity came many years later to be Dez's second assistant on Jersey Boys, I was like, I want to see this guy in action. He's extraordinary. So, yeah. So I'm sorry, this is a very long-winded answer. Growing up in New York was definitely a huge part of making me into the person I am and getting access to seeing the cool, great stuff,
Okay, because when you came to New York after college, you started your own theater company. How did that begin to shape you as the director you are today?
Yes, totally. So I think when my first job out of college was I was Lynn Meadows' intern at Manhattan Theater Club, which and she's like amazing, and it was amazing to look around and to see the work that was being made. And I think at the time I remember feeling like, to make a lot of the most successful directors, they weren't really a lot of young people weren't getting in school I was directing like, a Tennessee Williams adaptation, but 23-year-olds aren't getting asked to do that necessarily in New York. So you sort of came to that thing that so many theater people do, which is that you have to kind of create your own work. You have to give yourself a job. So I created a theater company to give myself a job. After assisting for other theater companies, it seemed to me clear that you really need to have a very specific mission. Otherwise, most off-Broadway theater companies have one of for missions. It's a little harder to stand out, that way. And so I kind of took a kind of Schoolhouse Rock approach of like, doing work about historical subject matter, but in irreverent context and idioms. And the first thing I did was I'm obsessed with presidents. And so I did a thing about Warren G. Harding with this very talented guy, Kyle Jarrow, who wrote SpongeBob. And then the second thing Kyle and I did together was a nativity pageant with 8 to 12-year-olds doing deadpan comedy. But they were doing a nativity pageant about the life of L. Ron Hubbard. And it was called A Very Merry Unauthorized Children's Scientology Pageant. You saw it? Wait, you saw it? Okay.
All your early stuff at the Ohio. I saw all your early stuff.
Wow. Thank you.
But that must have been so. How do you pronounce the name of your theater company? What was it?
Les Frères Corbusier. So the idea is the Corbusier brothers. So the idea was that it sounded like a pretentious theater company, but when you actually think about it, it just sounds stupid. So that was the duality of the company a little bit.
Because I was going to say, when I talked to Alex about his theater company, I'm not going to try to pronounce it because I thought it was the best.
Thank you.
Okay, so you have such an incredible career as a writer, director, and a producer. And what amazes me the most about you is everything you do is different and unique. Nothing is the same. And I think that's really special about what you do as a director.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I when I look at something, amazing script, I always think about, do I love it? And do I think I could uniquely maybe do something? And have I done something like this before? Because I want to come to the table always with fresh ideas and be additive for the writers and the producers, not subtractive or feel like it. And so that's very nice of you to say that. Thank you.
Yeah. But when I was researching just more in my head, I was like, everything that I've seen you do is totally different. And I love that because a lot of directors have a certain stamp or a bag of tricks or something they use over and over. You don't. Everything you do. And I think you direct as an audience member, right? I think you also direct like, what is the audience going to see, right?
Oh, thanks. Yeah, I really think about the audience experience from moment one. That's why I love like when you're walking in, how are you telling that story from before the show proper starts? But I always try to think about casting the audience in the experience, whether you're in this moment, you're in the seat at the Moulin Rouge, or you're at Imelda Marcos's wedding party, or I always think that to me, every Broadway show I've done has direct address. And I think that's not a coincidence. That's because what I love is like kicking over the footlights and saying, we're in a room together. We're about to tell the story together. It's a communal experience. And I think in a way, Moulin Rouge is the kind of like the epitome of that kind of like desire in that kind of work. But that's really nice of you to single out because the audience is crucial and so important to me.
Well, you can see that. Well, I want to Bloody Andrew Jackson, remains one of my favorite musicals. You collaborated with the late, great Michael Friedman on this. I mean, I'm going to ask you what he meant to you and what that collaboration meant to you on that show.
Yeah, it's the most extraordinary collaboration I've ever had. And he was the most wonderful, clever, witty, you talk about those people. I'm sure you did you're like 3 people that are the smartest people, like kind of thing. He is absolutely the top of that list. And I think for me as like someone who just revered his work with the civilians and to get to work with him finally on Bloody Andrew Jackson was a dream come true. And I learned so much from him. He's a great dramaturgical mind, a really heart forward person. And I've never met someone quite like him as a songwriter who's able to like really turn the knife in the middle of a song in such a set where you're like, oh, it's a song about like heartbreak. Oh, it's actually about America. Like, you're like, whoa, like this is, he has that. He had this ability to kind of manage the space between emotion and the emotional and the political, and then smash that together in a way that I found incredibly striking. And I'm no great writer. Like to the extent that Bloody Andrew Jackson is coherent at all was really like taking notes like under his elbow when he like said something smart, and I'd be like, I gotta write that goes in.
I'm gonna use that.
Yeah, I'm gonna use that.
But I just love that you celebrate him in your Moulin Rouge bio. I mean, Michael Friedman, I saw him early on too. Just one of the most brilliant creators of musical theater and just the genre in general. So then you got to direct the Pee Wee Herman show. What was it like living in the world of Pee Wee?
Oh, so fun. I mean, he's the most extraordinary, like creative. I mean, he created this whole world, you
Yeah.
know? And I think in theater, particularly when we think of like world creation, we don't think of comedy, you know, you don't think of like this sort of, and he did it, you know, he created all these puppets. He had this whole vision of this design, this vision of the character, and he cast all his friends, and he still cast them. Like when we did you know, the show on Broadway, he had his best pal was playing John B. the Genie, and like, you know, it's I mean, it's, you know, it's he's a very loyal guy, in addition to being a visionary. So it was so fun to be in that world, and wild. And he writes scripts. I don't know if you remember the show, but he writes scripts like they're like, you know, VFX driven movies. So like you'll read the script, you're like, it's only 70 pages. And then, you know, on each page, it's like, and then the pterodactyl flies through a window, picks up a thing, opens a soda can, and you're like, how the hell are we going to do any of this? So he really challenges you in ways that are, I feel, pretty inspiring.
Yeah. Peter and the Starcatcher was pure theatrics and magical. I mean, everything about that. You co-directed this with another legend, the late, great Roger Rees.
Amazing.
I remember opening night, you guys were dressed as like generals or captains with your captain hats on and your aviator glasses. And I said, those are the two coolest dudes. I said, I wonder what was going on before they arrived at the party. But I adored Roger, as everybody did. I mean, what made that collaborative so special, and what was it like working with Roger?
Well, you know, it was a little like, I think what he has, his like knowledge of theater history is extraordinary. His sense of like the way, because I met him through him being artistic director of Williamstown Theater Festival and me being like a little like directing assistant, and the way he inspires like the younger generations, like he's very into that, into the idea of mentoring, into the idea of building up company. I think it's because, you know, he worked at the RSC and there was that kind of that sense of like you help up the next generation. So it was extraordinary to see all these actors who are just doing so well, and they're like, you know, Roger's proteges, you know, it's like, it's so he was great at, wonderful at like giving back, also inspiring actor, inspiring director. I remember he did this one-man show with BD Wong, this crazy musical that was like one of my favorite things I've ever seen. It was so inventive, and like Peter and Starcatcher story theater, like I think it was like a trunk and like one other prop, and he conjured a whole world. So Roger's magical at that. And I think one of the things that made that show great was similar in Moulin Rouge, that you've got John Logan, who comes from one world, Sonia Tayo comes from another, Justin Levine, and the kind of collision of those worlds creates something unique. I think Roger's background, Rick Ellis, his husband's background as playwright, my background being from a kind of different world, and then the thing that was amazing about that cast, and I think what's true of the Blythe Lang and Andrew Jackson cast too, is that all those actors were really multi-hyphenates. There were very few that were like, I just see myself as an actor. You got like Kevin DeLaguila, who's also a director, a lyricist, a writer. And so you've got all these like big brains in the room. So when you're trying to figure things out, it's not just like incumbent upon the playwright, and there's no hierarchical system. It's like, I've got an idea. And to kind of have that, like, to have the kind of confidence as a team for all of us to just be like, who has an idea over here? Who has an idea over here? That show was really like not the like one person's vision. It was the aggregate of a bunch of like really great collaborators.
See, I think when you let everybody collaborate, they become more creative, and these shows just open up even more than you ever could have imagined. And it starts at the helm with the director. So, totally. What are some of your favorite memories of working on the Lynn Ahrens and Stephen Flaherty musical Rocky? I was say Roxy. Rocky.
Roxy. They should do Roxy. Well, first of all, like probably like you, I'm like a huge Lynn and Steve fan, and so getting to watch them. Lynn's like a really genius lyricist who has like the most like amazing, like vivid, like metaphor in the way that she writes. And then with Stephen, he's got the excitement of a like 23-year-old who's just out of like Carnegie Mellon, is like, how do I get going? I remember one of the things when we were in Germany, we were building this animatic of the Act 1 montage. And we had this like whole video thing of how the automation and projection would work together. And we sort of said, do you want to just like, can we just like hand this to you and you like score it like a film? And he was like, yes. And then he built this whole thing. And it's one of the like the most like soaring in that kind of like Wagnerian thing of like lights, music, all these things working together to tell a story that's like completely non-textual. So that was amazing. The other part of that project that was extraordinary was working with Tom Meehan, who I mean, like, you know the stat, but I'm not sure if all your viewers do, that Tom's the only book writer to ever have 3 shows on Broadway run over 2,000 performances. And so to like, you know, he wrote Hairspray, he wrote The Producers, he wrote Annie, he wrote a billion other things. And, you know, Spaceballs, I think was him. And like, I mean, like, extraordinary. So to sort of be in his presence was amazing. And I always made sure at casting that I was always like sitting next to him at the table and this, and just because he's just so sly and so kind and so warm. And yeah, I really miss him. That was another big highlight of that.
Yeah. But do you take away from working with all these incredible people at all these projects?
Well, I feel so lucky to get to work with like really extraordinary people, and also you feel really lucky when you get to work with people a second time and like you kind of know each other and trust each other and have things figured out. So you know, I always like when I was doing shows downtown, I would always say like, okay, if there are 4 designers on a show, I want to work with 2 I've worked with before and 2 I've never worked with before, because they'll challenge and inspire, and then 2 people you have like and I think that's how I'd like to look at it, all collaborations, like always working with new people, always trying to like feed off and understand new ideas, and then keep building on those relationships that, you know, that are so fulfilling and extraordinary. I don't know if that's a great answer, but that's definitely how I look at that.
Totally. Listen, just to be in the room with Lynn, Stephen, and Tom, what else do you need? There was so much more, including your incredible cast led by Andy Carl. I mean, everything, production team on that. But you talked about collaborating with people again. That takes me to my next question. You have quite a history collaborating with David Byrne and Annie B. Parsons, first on Here Lies Love, and then most recently American Utopia.
Yeah.
Talk about that collaboration and what makes that so special, because I met David and Annie at a hotel where I got to interview them all before American Utopia. I fell in love with both of them. And Annie is the best. You know, both of them are. So what has that whole collaboration been like, working on Here Lies Love and then, of course, on American Utopia?
Yeah. They're amazing. I mean, David is, you know, as you know, is like a total visionary, and he's not just like, you know, a composer or a performer or a songwriter. I mean, he's like a cultural icon, and he writes about, you know, he's a filmmaker. He writes about urban planning. He's a modern Ben Franklin, you know, like he's today's Ben Franklin. And so to sort of like learn from him and be around him and be able to help like execute his vision is wonderful. And Annie B is an amazing compliment for him. I mean, she's also, you know, not only an incredible choreographer, she's an incredible director, and Big Dance Theater is a wildly influential company, you know, that performs internationally. And I think what's wonderful is that, you know, in each collaboration, you sort of bring different things to the table. Someone's more driving story, someone's more driving, you know, pushing the aesthetics further. And I think with the 3 of us, what I love is that those lines aren't always clear. And Annie B's always up for like, hey, what if? And she's always like, you know, and I'm always up for like, oh, does that make sense? You know, like that kind of a thing. So it's very cool. And I was, by the way, you know, probably like you, fans of them before I ever met them and forever got to work with them. And so it's really nice when you get to work with people who are really, you know, have no need to be like kind and gentle and are, you know, it's pretty extraordinary.
Because I remember talking to you opening night of American Utopia. I knew his music, but of course I was brought up on cast albums and soundtracks.
Sure.
I knew his music. I think I told you, it was one of the most hypnotic nights of just sitting there. I don't know. I don't smoke anything or anything like that, but I felt like I was transported, like an outer body experience of being at that show.
Yeah, he is, you know, Stop Making Sense was one of the, you know, the most, you know, one of the most incredible concert films ever. Right. And he had these visions of like, what I think, you know, how do I support the music? How do I build a journey over the night from a guy with a boombox to this like epic, you know, like thing that belongs at the, you know, at the Met or whatever. And he And so he has that sense of vision. And on this thing, he was like, what have I not seen before? I want to have people untethered to cables because I want it to be about the community of musicians. I want them to be able to dance. I want to be able to, he had these ideas about these lights that would follow people by a radio signal. And why is that? It's not to be fancy. It's because then you're not with the front light tagging the chains that are, and so you can separate them as like planar surfaces of color. I mean, it's like, who thinks like that? That's like how he thinks. It's like, it's so cool to like stroll in his mind a little bit. Yeah.
Totally brilliant. The Robert Bridegroom, I told you, I love your production because I had seen the original one. I told, the creators that night, favorite memory of working on Robert Bridegroom for you. So much fun and hilarious and just everything about it, comedic, everything.
Yeah. Favorite memory. That's a hard one because everything was like so joyous and fun. Like the thing you felt on stage, like in the audience was the thing we felt on stage too. I would say that like one of the coolest things was working on Justin Levine from Moulin Rouge and Martin Lowe worked on the orchestrations, and they really tried to dig into this kind of like really sort of modern bluegrass sound. And so watching Bob Waldman, who's this amazing composer, I love that original album, and watching him work with these orchestrators who are like, we've got this take on what you're doing that's going to feel more like Mumford and Sons, but also like this. And then like Anna O'Reilly, who's having her first off-Broadway experience singing Sleepy Man to this, and all this. I think the music, that part of it was really, in some ways the most fun, but also all of Leslie Kritzer's Pratfalls. I think that would be number 2.
Because we have to get to Leslie, because she was here a few months ago, and
cool.
She of course did the Robert Bridegroom and of course Beetlejuice with you. And I asked her, what was it like working with Alex Timbers? And she said he is the greatest director to work with, hands down.
Oh, that's so great. I feel the same way about her. It's so great when you get a bunch of really smart like comedians in a room, and then you sort of say like, here are kind of a couple governing ideas, and then let loose. And I feel that way about her. I feel that way about Alex Brightman and Carrie Butler. I mean, I could go on, but Greg Hildreth, all these amazing performers that I felt really lucky I get to work with. Again, like, I go back to Blay Blay, Andrew Jackson. I don't know if I wrote a single line of that. I think it was all crowdsourced from like really funny people in the room. So that to me is the greatest win. And it's the thing I've had to learn over the years, like is the kind of confidence of leadership to say, it's okay to have a bunch of ideas and then like throw them away and just like be guided by a bunch of other great artistic voices, as long as you kind of set a couple of substantial storytelling guardrails, and then you keep talking about what it is. And I remember when we had that out of town for Beetlejuice in DC, where we got nailed, and we had this list, like an 18-page list of all the things we were going to change. And instead of just sort of like putting that in drips and drabs, like we all like linked arms and said, let's look at this list. Okay, what about this? Who's got that? I've got that. You got that. Anthony King and Scott Brown, they've got that. And this person's got that. And then we went and like we checked things off. And I've never, I think the transformative process of that show was exhilarating. But the thing that I learned about it was just the power of like empowering a whole team of people to kind of go forth and kind of remake something. It was, that was very moving. Yeah.
No, but that sort of answers my question when I was going to ask you what your favorite memory. The creative team on Beetlejuice too, totally everybody from every different walk of life came together to create this musical that audiences fell in love with. I mean, I loved, because I saw Beetlejuice like 3 or 4 times, and I loved being outside, just meeting the fans.
Oh, they're so great. Yeah, they were the amazing fans, and they're still making these videos during the pandemic that are, more just topping each other. That was great. That, at the beginning of that process, we had a couple of things that felt needed to be true, but one of them was this needed to be really, really funny. And I work with these 2 guys on Gutenberg, the musical, which was this great experience with Jeremy Shamus and Chris Fitzgerald. And we said, and I said to the producer, could we hire Anthony and Scott? And they fully endorsed it. And that really got us off to the races. And it was such a wonderful experience. And then people like William Ivy Long, like, he and I were, when I was going to do that James Corden for him, he was going to be the costume designer. And I just was like, just salivating at being in his studio. I mean, I'm sure you've been in his studio too. It's so cool. And then to have that interrupted, now to get to make good on that with something that's like Beetlejuice, where it unlocks all his the power of transformation that he shows in Cinderella. I was like, can we do that like 8 times in this? Because you're so good at that. It was like all that kind of the stuff that, him knowing that there are like 86 kinds of black, that there's no such thing as black and white. There's this and this and this and this. I mean, it's like, so to get to soak up that from a genius like that is so cool.
Okay, I still hope that James Corden Forum happens for you all.
Oh yeah. He should totally do that. I mean, he would be amazing. So.
I mean, have you directing it? Have William Ivey Long doing the costumes? I'm sure the other team you put together, but he'd be fabulous as Pseudolus in that.
He's so talented.
Then there's Oh Hello on Broadway, working with Nick and John. I mean, did you know them beforehand?
No, well, so I met Nick in those guys changed my life. I loved working with them, and I love working with them. I met Nick maybe right after Blah Blah Andrew Jackson. We had a coffee together, and it was one of those things. I'm sure you have these too, where you're like, you have a kind of create a blind date, and you're sort of like, you do this, I do this. We'll probably never work together, but you seem amazing. Yeah. And then about 5 years ago, 5 years later, but about 5 years ago now too, I was in Stuttgart, believe it or not, reteching Rocky, because had been running in Germany for like 3 years at that point. We're putting in a new city. And I got this thing from him. He's like, I've got this. And my voicemail wasn't working. And he was like, we were old men and we're doing it at the Cherry Lane. And, it was one of those moments where you're like, this is a trust the artist moment, not a trust I had the flu. It was so bad, but I was like, yes, whatever you want. And it was the greatest flyer I've ever taken. That show was, I loved working on that show, and I loved working with those guys.
Because it was just, I was like, how did Alex get involved in this? I was like, but it was so perfect. And then you did John's one-man show at Radio City, Kid Gorgeous. All right, I can't believe we're almost out of time, but what is the biggest challenge of directing a 2-man show and a 1-man show?
I think with Radio City, the question of scale is really, really, 6,500 people and then one person. But John is like that. I mean, you felt like you were right there with him during it. And when we got to the process of the editing the special, what was also extraordinary was he did something I think he sold out 7 performances or something, maybe it was even 9. And we filmed all from the front and a bunch of shows from the river. And then we had no trouble editing it together, because literally like a musical theater, like a Leslie Kritzer, everything was in the exact same place. Everything cut together beautifully. You could go from performance 1 to performance 9, because he is such a professional. I hope he does more musical theater too, and writes musical theater, because he and Nick both have brilliant minds that that Broadway would benefit more and more from. I think I, on behalf of Broadway, as one small part of it, please do more here.
I'm sure they'll come back.
Yeah.
Mozart, we didn't have a chance to get into that, but my God, you helped create that and do all this stuff with Mozart. I mean, that must have been incredible to work on that.
It's a totally wonderful experience. And Paul Weitz and Roman Coppola and Jason Schwartzman and this guy, Will Graham, who I stay in touch with daily. They were all wonderful, and I as a young person loved all those things where theater and TV or theater and film and all that stuff get mixed up, and you see the performing arts represented on screen, and so that I thought was a great gift to get, and so many New York theater performers ended up in that show.
Well, one of my final questions is, like I told you, Moulin Rouge, the musical, is one of my all-time favorites. I was falling in love with it first out of town and many times in New York, and I cannot wait to be there, hopefully on the first night that Broadway comes back.
God, I hope it's
in the Hirschfeld. But what must be wonderful for you is to realize how this musical has affected audiences that have flown in from all over the world to experience this on stage at the Hirschfeld, what that means to you.
Yeah, I mean, it happened up in Boston. Like we had a woman who came and saw it from Japan 10 times in a row. People who came from Spain and South America and these places that just that movie and that story means so, like, specifically so much. Like, you know, just flying in for the first weekend, that was wonderful. And then the and just knowing that you're telling a story about truth, beauty, freedom, and love, and like, you know, these things are really, really necessary values. These bohemian ideals over this past period, and so to be telling a story that's that affirmative and you know, that celebrates beauty and love and acceptance, and I think that's really like a great place to be living the last couple of years. So
yeah. You've also made these beautiful little videos that are on, I think, Facebook and Instagram about what you have missed and what, you know, with the theater being shut down, and to the Actors Fund and to Broadway Cares. I mean, those videos are so beautiful. What that meant to make those.
Yeah, I just, like you living in Times Square, you just see every day, you see the absence and you feel that deeply. So we're very lucky to have these amazing organizations like Broadway Cares that are taking care of artists and taking care of artists' families and people in need. And I think that's, you know, theater is a healing thing. And so we're very lucky to have organizations like that. Yeah.
Well, thank you for making those little videos. They're really, really beautiful. It just puts it out there. People who like, oh my gosh, I can donate a little something. I will donate something. So it just makes that extra special. My final question for you is, what have you learned about yourself during this pandemic?
I think, like a lot of people, I've learned I don't sit still well. You know, I'm so eager for us all to get back to making theater, and it's been a real treat to get to be part of these casting processes, but to be back in a room with actors and collaborators, and to be at a party speaking to you. That's what I dream of, and I can't wait for that.
This has been thrilling. I have wanted to sit with you for like an in-depth for the longest time.
Too. Thank you for having me. It's such a pleasure.
Like I said, I go back to your early shows at the Ohio and even.
I didn't know that. I'm thrilled.
You know, because I was, you know, I traveled all the way down to those. I was like, Alex Timbers. I said, first, this guy has the coolest name, and then I would see your show. So it's been so wonderful to follow your career from the very beginning of the off-Broadway scene that you started to where you are today.
Oh, thank you. And I've got to say, what you're doing, celebrating theater and celebrating theater makers during this really tough time, is it's so vital and it's so important. So I really appreciate that. Just selfishly, I love living in your interview. So thank you.
Well, thank you, Jason. I cannot wait to hold you or hug you the next time I see you, which hopefully will be really soon. Everybody, until we see you the next time, stay safe, wear a mask, and we'll see you soon.